Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. Hi, everybody. The topic tonight is surrender. The scuttlebutt on the street in the West is that we don't do well with surrender. And the reason is that we don't actually understand surrender. A lot of people think that surrender means throwing yourself at somebody's feet, giving up your intelligence, your discrimination, possibly your goods, possibly your body, and then ending up sometime later complaining about whoever it is you think you were surrendering to on an internet site. But that really has nothing to do with surrender. We might think that surrender is throwing ourselves at somebody's feet once again and saying, okay, I've done it, I'm done, I've surrendered, now you fix everything. That's not surrender either. What surrender means is surrendering to our real nature. That's the only form of surrender that actually is. We discover in what direction to go that will help us to discover our real nature. And we just agree to go that way. So we use our freedom to agree to go in the direction of our own realization. All surrenders is this. We're surrendering to that natural process of unfoldment. How do we do that? The first thing we have to surrender is the watcher. Watching ourselves, doing everything and deciding everything, and watching other people and being vigilant about other people and ourselves is the opposite of surrender. So, you'll hear people say, well, how do you choose a spiritual teacher? And the advice you're given is, well, watch them, see how they behave, see how they treat you, analyze them from this perspective and that perspective, look at what they're wearing, how they walk and talk, all this kind of thing. And it's not that we leave that stuff out, but that type of watching, analyzing from some concept that we already have about how things should be and how people should be and how we should be, doesn't ever lead to surrender. So I know people who have been trying to decide, if some teacher or another is their teacher. They've been trying to decide for 10 years, using this method of adding up pros and cons, how I feel about this, how I think about that, whether this person is living up to some concept that I have or some idea of what a spiritual teacher is supposed to be. That will never lead to surrender. That just leads to the same old kind of decision that you make all the time, and that just perpetuates your life in samsara. So we have to surrender that watcher. We have to surrender that aspect that we have highly trained that teaches us to exist in a dualistic relationship with ourselves. Ourselves, what we're doing, what we're feeling, and then what we think about it. Woulda, shoulda, couldas, all that stuff. In order to discover real surrender, we have to both go inside and then go outside. So we have to go inside to discover our senses and using our mind as a sense organ, and to discover the feelings, the promptings of our wisdom heart, the promptings that can be found in Hridaya Akasha, the space of the heart chakra. We have to discover our real actual senses, our touch, our smell, our sight, our hearing, our thinking in the sense of discovering. We have to use our mind as an organ of discovery and curiosity, not as an organ of conceptualizing, projecting, planning, and analyzing. So we have to go inside to reconnect with our total sensorium, our bodies, our minds, and our wisdom heart. We have to stop walking around like brains on sticks and go inside and discover that through our practice. And then we have to bring all that from the center of ourselves outward to actually engage with our environment. We have to engage with our environment very directly, using all of our senses in an open-ended way. And this is how we can discover what surrender is. We engage directly with our environment. We engage directly with our situation in an open, responsive way, and we feel for what we know already is good and healthy. We all have a sense of this cosmic goodness. Cosmic goodness is not moralistic goodness, it's not ethical goodness, it's not fascistic goodness. It's simply that recognition of what situation, what activity or non-activity, what relationships will further our discovery of our real nature and what will not. And we all have a sense of this, at least intermittent. Many, many times people come to me. In fact, most of the time when people come to me for discussions about some problem or some confusion in their lives, they already know how they feel about something and what they should do about it. Even if they come and say, I'm so confused, I don't know what to do, they really already know. And then by the time they leave, whatever it is that we've discussed, they say, yes, I knew that already. So what's happening? What's happening is that we throw up this wall of confusion and doubt and analysis and alternatives and choices that are all just kind of frantic hand waving, trying to distract us from this way of just going with what we already know is good and healthy in a cosmic sense. And we don't want to go directly to this way of what is good and healthy in a cosmic sense because we fear the openness of life. We know that that way cannot be managed or controlled in the same way that we, control our calendar, our Google Calendar. We have to simply go that way and discover what happens, and we fear that openness, and we even fear the liveliness that we sense going in that direction will come into our lives. We fear that incredible liveliness of life just expressing itself without all these impediments, without these things that we throw up to slow everything down and chunk everything into bits and control everything. So this is why we manufacture all these worries and doubts and anxieties and confusions. They are real, but we're making them. We're creating them in order to form a barrier between ourselves and the openness of life. So that's the sense in which all those things are real. So we want to learn through our practice and through remembering to do it, to use our whole sensory apparatus, everything we've got, heart, mind, body, everything, to reach out and feel for the presence of a situation, the presence of the moment, our own presence. We hear people talk a lot about the present. We have to be in the present, which is kind of ridiculous because we really couldn't be doing anything else but that. Even if we're future projecting or past projecting, whatever we're doing, we're always in the present. All of those things are part of the present. And people talk about the present moment as if it were some sort of frozen thing that we're, use some sort of glary hard focus to try to get into contact with. What we really want to get in contact with is presence, not the present. The living presence that is in a timeless moment, that is all-encompassing. We want to get in touch with that real, tangible feeling of presence. You could call that energy, you could call that awareness, you could call it both energy and awareness. That's pervasive everywhere. We want to get in touch with that, and we want to be in a kind of communication with that, even though it's nothing but our own self, Shiva nature. We can have this experience of being in communication. That's what this manifest world is actually for having that feeling of communication. So we're in our bodies, we're in our mind, using our mind as a sense organ, which is really the organ of curiosity. That's what our mind really is. The organ of discovery, of curiosity. We want to be in our real senses. We want to be reaching out into our environment and feeling for the direction or the action or the non-action that has that signature, that very recognizable signature of what is good and healthy in a cosmic sense, in the sense of that it's good for our unfoldment, it's healthy for our unfoldment. It is the opportunity for relaxation, for letting go of tensions, for discovering more about life. And when we discover this direction or this action or this non-action, when we taste that feeling of goodness, that signature of really cosmic, booming cosmic health, not physical health, I mean the healthiness, the basic healthiness of Shiva nature. When we taste that, then we use our freedom to follow that, to follow it. So this is what people call the choiceless choice. We make a choice to follow what is choiceless. It's choiceless because all life is going in that direction anyway. There's a huge river flowing. We're part of that river toward self-realization, towards real self-understanding, toward embodying all of our nature, our Shiva nature. And we can participate in that with more awareness by agreeing to go in that direction. Whenever we agree to go in that direction, when we use our freedom to agree to go in that direction, we have a moment of surrender. We're surrendering because to go in that direction, we have to let go of some of these constructs that we've thrown up to create boundaries in our lives, our ideas about ourselves and other people, the way we always do things, our fears and doubts and worries that we throw up on purpose to have something to do with ourselves while we're not ready yet to taste real openness. So whenever we meet these moments, and they can be very, very small. Just deciding whether to go out with some friends on some particular night or not. You're thinking about maybe they're friends that not quite in line with where you're going, but they have some other benefit you think there would be to hanging out with them. Maybe you just don't want to look like a stick in the mud. Maybe you're afraid if you don't go out with somebody on Thursday that you'll never have anybody to go out with again. Maybe you just think something about yourself, like you're not social enough, but you use everything, all your senses and your heart and your mind, and you just really feel, you just have a hit, you get a taste, that it would just be good and healthy to stay home and relax and maybe do some practice or just hang out with yourself or be in nature or whatever. And then you have to make that choiceless choice. And there's always some fear involved because of the openness of it. You're letting go of some concepts that you have about yourself or other people. So there's always a little bit of fear involved, and that's how you can recognize these moments. There's always a little hump you have to get over. Sometimes it's little, sometimes it's a huge mountain. But the more that you do it, the mountain turns into a hill, and then the hill turns into a little hillock, and then the little hillock turns into a little bump in the road. And finally, after many experiences, making those choiceless choices, using your freedom to go in the direction of goodness and healthiness, it becomes quite easy. Because every time you make that choice, there's a benefit of expansion for you, of expanding your capacity to be in the world, to express yourself, to love yourself and other people, your capacity for compassion, for relaxation, for activity that is beneficial. Every time you make one of those choices, no matter how small, your capacity increases. And you start to understand that pattern of fear, and then making the choice, using your freedom, and then moving into that open-ended choicelessness, getting yourself in the river more completely, leading to deeper relaxation, letting go of tensions. You start to recognize that pattern, and you start to be less afraid of it. Even the fear itself, which can be intense at times, itself becomes less fearful. You're not avoiding fear so much because you understand it's just part of the process. So every time we do this, we're surrendering to our own nature, to the direction that we're already going in, and we make the choice to follow that. One of the examples I like to use of this total tasting method of being in the world is when you're planning a dinner party. So perhaps I'm planning to cook for some of you, and I invite you over, and I want to make a nice meal. And, there's some people who really have to have a recipe. And not only do they have to have recipes, but they have to follow those recipes to a T. And they're measuring out everything very, very properly. And they have to have, one ingredient is missing. They freak out. And there's really no sense of tasting. They're just going along with this recipe. And in essence, the recipe is very divorced from their actual experience of food. On the other hand, the way that I usually put meals together, if I'm cooking for other people or even for myself, is I don't have much of a plan. I get some idea of something that would be nice based on the weather and who's coming and all that. And I go to the grocery store and I wander around and I imbibe the food there with my eyes and my nose and my ears and my senses. And as I'm moving through the aisles, I'm using my mind and my imagination to taste things. I'm using my memory of how things taste, and I'm combining and recombining things in that more subtle way until, I say, oh, no, that doesn't work. I taste something and I realize it doesn't work. And then I recombine until I come up with a combination that I know works based on my sense memory, on my experience. And that you can move through life like this all the time, reaching out, using your awareness, using your intelligence, using your senses. You can be feeling your way through every moment without any projections, without a whole lot of planning or applying a whole lot of concepts. And you can have this really engaged, participatory experience with life, with your body, with your mind and your environment. This is how we make our way when we're a little bit more relaxed. But you can discover this already. And in fact, I would encourage everybody to think about moments in your life when you've already done this. Sometimes people hear teaching like this and they think, oh no, that's too hard, or I'm so far away from that, but you're really not. Maybe there's something that you chose to do recently that was a little bit outside of your normal range, but you just went ahead and did it because it felt right to you. Those are all the kinds of moments I'm talking about. So surrender always has to be based on a real feeling, on a real perception of goodness. You need to perceive. Don't think about or project or speculate or apply concepts. You really can never surrender by deciding what is a good idea or whether it's something you should do, or because you think surrendering is, like a spiritual fashion statement. You're going to throw yourself at somebody's feet and that looks good, and that's what you think spirituality is about. That's just mimicking acts of surrender. That's not real surrender. But when we live based on our real engagement, the engagement of all of our senses, whether we're surrendering to a teacher, a practice, a direction, or a relationship, to doing something or not doing something, we understand that we're just surrendering to our real nature. We're surrendering, you want to say, your dharma, the direction that you're going in towards unfoldment. All surrender is that. It doesn't matter how practical it is, how everyday it is, or how quote-unquote spiritual it is. It's all the same thing, all the same process, all the same surrender. It's always making that choiceless choice. So when we meet a teacher, of course, we're going to observe that person. We're going to notice things about them, but we're also going to use our wisdom heart and our senses to discover whether there's some goodness here, whether there's some healthiness here, and then we can surrender to that. We don't have to make such a big deal about, whether some teacher meets all of our criteria. If there's goodness there, if there's healthiness, that teacher is mirroring our own nature to us. What we're surrendering to then, if we discover that in our real heart of wisdom, is that teacher, to whatever extent that teacher might be capable, is mirroring something of our real nature to us. And when we touch a teacher's feet or pranam before a teacher, or just sit openly and listen and absorb and put into practice that what the teacher teaches, that's the greatest pranam any teacher can expect. When we do that, based on a real perception that this teacher is mirroring our own good and healthy nature to us, our more expansive, open nature, then we can do that with confidence, and we'll never find ourselves on an internet site complaining about anybody. So I encourage you not to get all involved in analyzing your fear of surrender, if you can possibly help doing that. Lots of people like to talk about how afraid of surrender they are. Of course you're afraid. And you're afraid of openness. That's what you're afraid of. You're afraid of the unboundedness of life and its unpredictability. And so just take that as a given. And, feel your fear. But don't try to analyze it, because there's really nothing to say about it other than what I just said. What you really want to concentrate on is your longing for surrender, not your fear of surrender. The fear will be there for everybody, and the longing will be there for everybody. Focus on your longing for surrender. Cultivate that and feel that. That will really always lead you in the right direction. That is really the voice of God in you, that longing for surrender, the longing to relax and take refuge in your own nature. So when we're talking about surrender, we're really talking about taking refuge in your own nature. And that applies to, again, the most mundane situations, so-called mundane, and also to deciding whether or not to study with a teacher or to go and be with a certain tradition. It's all about refuge. It's all about taking refuge in your real nature. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.